Nick Fuentes, a name that's been identified as someone forbidden, someone to be ignored, not given a platform. Tucker Carlson, the boogeyman of the Republican Party that they have desperately tried to silence. However, despite this, Nick Fuentes is now firmly established in the party. Someone I believe can actually shape the politics of the future, which I'm not alone in saying. Joe Rogan recently stated 10 years ago, 20 years ago, couldn't have existed. Now, super popular. What's 20 years from now look like? Maybe someone like that can win. The point of bringing Joe Rogan into this is that he's not just some nobody who's running his mouth. He's someone who has real impacts on our society that people actively listen to on a daily basis. And by acknowledging Nick Fuentes, I believe it shows that big fish like Joe Rogan can no longer ignore his presence. But to understand how Nick Fuentes has been able to climb up to the top, despite so much resistance from the Republican Party, I believe we have to look back to October with his interview with Tucker Carlson, who is a very prominent person in the Republican Party. This, I believe, marks his introduction to becoming infamous. Not famous, not popular, infamous. Because the only things I knew about this guy after the interview with Tucker Carlson was that he was a racist and an anti-Semite, which made him this controversial enigma. This followed by the pushback from big fish like Ben Shapiro, Ted Cruz, and Piers Morgan in the Republican Party helped add to this controversy, which honestly, I think is pretty interesting how he used this controversy against him with, regardless if you agree with what he says or not, allowed him to gain so much popularity that I would say he's almost mainstream at this point. Despite all the pushback he's gotten from the Republican Party, he is now, without question, a household name. But another major factor, I believe, that happened before the interview was the assassination of Charlie Kirk in September. And I was talking to some of the people I know, and I was telling them that after Charlie Kirk died, there was a massive hole within the Republican Party. Because Charlie Kirk, regardless if you agree with him or not, he was a very big voice in the Republican Party. And after the interview with Tucker Carlson and all these big fish condemning him, trying to silence him, the people who looked up to Charlie, they started looking up to Nick Fuentes, and he became their voice instead of Charlie. Finally, I believe the hyperpolarization of our politics today has allowed someone like Nick Fuentes to rise in popularity as much as he has, because when I've talked to people about this, they tended to agree with me that when countries become hyperpolarized, they tend to accept more extremist rhetoric, similar to the Weimar Republic in Germany, which was known for hyperinflation. Because of this, a certain Austrian man with a mustache was able to rise to prominence. The point I'm trying to make with the hyperpolarization is that 5-10 years ago, he wouldn't have been able to gain this much popularity, not even close. I don't even think he would have been relevant to this day. But what I believe it shows is that the political landscape in our country, in America, is that things that were once not tolerated, accepted, are starting to become more mainstream. And at the end of the day, because with all the controversy Nick Fuentes has had, he used it very, very well to his advantage. And the other thing is that it doesn't matter how controversial you are. If you're not saying anything interesting, at the end of the day, people aren't going to listen to you. They're just not. That's just a fact. Which is why I can say with absolute certainty, Nick Fuentes is here, and Nick Fuentes is here to stay.